There is an incredible parenting concept in Parshas Mishpatim that opens us up to a whole new way of thinking in parenting. It's chapter 23, verse 28. The Almighty is explaining how you're going to conquer the land of Israel. Don't worry, I'm going to send in these deadly wasps. Vishalakti et Sirah. And they're going to chase out. You don't have to worry. They're going to chase out the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Hittites. You're going to be fine. But then it adds a little caveat. Verse 29. I'm not going to drive them out in a single year. Why not? Because then the cities will be depopulated. They will be filled with wild animals like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. And the obvious question is, well, how did God get the hornets to chase out the Hittites? And you go, well, I don't know, but he's God. He's obviously, he can do these things. I mean, hornets, last I checked, don't have the hero, don't have free will, so it's not a problem. Well, if it's not a problem to send in the hornets, so why can't he keep out the wild animals, the lions and tigers and bears? Oh my. So Rav Noach used to ask this question: which would you rather have, a sane enemy or an insane enemy? And my first reaction to that question was an insane enemy, obviously. Which is, Rav Noach's questions are always the obvious answer was the wrong answer. And he would say, no, you want a sane enemy. So the Rambam writes that when you go to war, do not attack an enemy on four sides. Now, Sun Tzu, in his book, The Art of War, he writes that he was able to conquer far greater forces because he surrounded himself by his enemy on four sides. In other words, he got himself in a trap of four sides. The antithesis of the Rambam, the opposite image of that. And the answer is you don't attack an enemy on four sides. Not because you have rachamim on them. They're your enemy. These are Nazis. But because when you surround your enemy on four sides, you turn your sane enemy into an insane enemy. They become crazed. They've got no other choice, and therefore they're going to fight to the bitter end. The slogan, remember the Alamo, has a double entendre. Because not only does it mean, remember the Alamo, but it also means that if the Mexicans hadn't surrounded Davy Crockett and the others, maybe there'd be a lot more Mexicans around. But when you surround your enemy, you make them into a fierce fighting force. This is a mistake that the Israeli army has made on numerous occasions, and that's the problem we have with the Gaza Strip, is they're surrounded on four sides. You turn your sane enemy into an insane enemy. And so too, the Torah is telling you, which enemy would you prefer? The Hittites or the wild animals? So now you understand. Obviously, you'd rather have the Hittites. Why? Because if you get rid of the Hittites too quickly, then you're going to have the wild animals. And you don't want the wild animals. You'd rather have the Hittites. Why? Because they're a sane enemy, and a wild animal is an insane enemy. In other words, a wild animal will attack in an irrational way. Because, after all, nothing personal against lions and tigers and bears, oh my, but they can do crazy things. And you'd rather have a sane enemy that realizes he can't win and will run away. So you'd rather have the Hittites than the wild animals. Now, the question is, well, why can't you get rid of both? And the answer is, in other words, get rid of the Hittites and don't have the wild animals. And the answer is that if you get rid of a sane enemy too quickly, you will end up with an insane enemy. That's the golden rule of life. Because Israel defeated its enemy in 1948 and 1967 so quickly, they ended up with an insane enemy, suicide terrorists. No suicide terror. They weren't fighting to the death. Now they're fighting to their death. Because you get rid of a sane enemy too quickly, God will send an insane enemy. If you become wealthy too quickly, the Almighty will send you an insane enemy. Problems will occur that you cannot predict. It's just crazy stuff. And we see this all the time, because what's the insane enemy? Arrogance. You start to think you can do everything. So how does the Almighty deal with arrogance? He sends a crazy enemy against you, an insane enemy against you, and you don't know how to deal with it. Israel beat 5 standing armies in 1948, and they're at their knees. They don't know what to do with the Gaza Strip. They're just a bunch of thugs. And Israel just doesn't know what to do, because they've got an insane enemy, and it's giving them another. Humility. Now, how does that relate to parenting? So you see, this is the typical scenario. You're having an argument with your son or your daughter about any particular issue, and you're not getting anywhere. You know what that's like? So what do? You call in reinforcements. Honey, come and talk to your son or daughter about this and tell them they can't blah, 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 whatever the issue is. And never do that. Never do that, because you're surrounding them on 4 sides. Not literally, emotionally. In other words, you're not getting through. You're not winning the argument. And so you call in reinforcements to now surround your son or your daughter. And you may win that battle, but you will lose the war, because you're going to turn your sane enemy into an insane enemy. They're not going to be rational. Why? Because you broke the rule. You were having a discussion with your kid, and it wasn't going the way you'd like it to go, and you couldn't get through for whatever reasons. And let's just assume you're right and they're wrong. It may be the opposite, but let's just assume that. But you're not getting through. So you call in reinforcements. What's that kid going to be thinking now? I'm not going to debate with that parent anymore. Why? Because I'll never win. They will never let me win. So therefore, they're not going to engage, because they know you'll never let them win. Does that mean you have to let them win? Sometimes. But what it really means is you're going to have to up your communication skills to get through to this kid. But by bringing in reinforcements and surrounding your kid, don't do that. You don't want to turn your kid into an insane enemy.